You're listening to Science and Spirituality with Deepak Chopra.
Hello, my friends. This is Deepak again. And once again, I have the pleasure of having a conversation with Rupert Spira. Every time I speak to him, I learn something new. And I get some ideas myself on how to explore what he's saying in my own life. Because what Rupert Spira teaches, and today we're going to talk a little bit about this book, You Are the Happiness You Seek, Uncovering the Awareness of Being. What Rupert does more than anyone else that I know is he gives you a kind of a lived-in experience of the knowledge. It's not knowledge you just learn, it's knowledge you become. So once again, Rupert, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you, Deepak. Lovely to be with you and talk with you again, as always.
And I did, by the way, send a copy of the book to our friend Oprah Winfrey. So Oprah,
oh, lovely, good.
If Oprah, if you're watching this or get to see this, I'll send you another copy, and hope you can speak to Rupert sometime. Okay, so Rupert, I was going through your book, and there's so much to learn in this book. It's kind of expands on some of your other amazing books. And, non-duality is a very difficult idea to comprehend for most people intellectually. But even when they comprehend it intellectually, then they don't somehow feel that they can experientially become that knowledge. Unless they're in the presence of a teacher or they get some guidance, etc. So, having read this book very carefully, and everyone who's watching us, please consider reading it. Your life will be transformed. I thought today perhaps we can focus on one area that, because there's so much to discuss here, we could do a whole series on the book on every chapter. I'd love to read some of these chapters later, the headlines. But first of all, thank you for doing this book. But secondly, I thought we just, I found this chapter, Attending to Painful Emotions,
yes,
very, very helpful experientially for people. Because that's what they come for. When you say you are the happiness that you seek, it implies whoever is reading this book is not happy yet. Okay, otherwise they wouldn't be reading this book, right? So they're obviously not happy yet, and they're not happy because maybe they think enough money will make them happy, or maybe they think the right relationship will make them happy, or maybe they think that if they had all the health in the world, they would be happy. If they didn't get old, they'd be happy. If there was no death, they would be happy. On and on. People have many reasons not to be happy. And as I've looked at this whole notion of emotional distress over my life, and I've looked at it very carefully because I'm a physician. That's part of my job, is to help alleviate suffering. And suffering is, biological as well as psychological and emotional. But on the other hand, what I've also realized is that almost universally, and I'll stop after I give my long introduction, almost universally, emotional turbulence is a result of some kind of trauma in the past, or interpretation of some kind of trauma in the past. Almost everyone. I recently was talking to Gabor Mate. I said, I don't have any trauma in my life. He said, you do. So I said, I can't think of something. And then, I kept thinking of it. And then I realized, when I was 6 years old, my parents were in England, and my grandfather suddenly died, and I had the fear of death, and I felt abandoned and all of that. So of course I had trauma. And
yes.
memory of trauma somehow or the other becomes anger at some point. The desire to get even becomes hostility at some point. The fear of trauma again creates anxiety. The redirection of it at yourself creates guilt and shame and humiliation. And the totality of the above creates depression, which is the number one pandemic of our time. So when I was reading your book, I said, let's today just talk about this chapter. It's very important, not that the others aren't, but people are coming to read this book because they're unhappy, and they're unhappy because they have painful emotions. And you have a very elegant way of saying either you're denying them or getting distracted, or you're doing some kind of inquiry, or you're becoming one with them. And, I had my own process, which is a 7-step process, which used to be, feel the emotion in your body, label it, describe it, share it, understand it, but ultimately release it. And it was quite an elaborate process. 7 steps: responsibility, being aware of it, diffusing it, telling yourself your story, looking at other people's points of stories, then doing some ritual to release it and moving on. And I've done that all my life very effectively. So I don't harbor or hold on to any emotions. I look at them and let them pass. But your 3 steps here was very, very insightful. And I'll stop now. The rest of the interview is for you to help us understand this.
Yes. Okay. Thank you, Deepak. In the book, in this chapter, I really give 2 basic approaches to painful emotions, and I characterize them as the Vedantic and Tantric approaches. And as you know, in the Vedantic approach, we turn away from the content of experience. I'm not my thoughts, I'm that which is aware of them. I'm not my feelings, I'm that which knows them, and so on. And so we turn away from the content of experience back towards that which knows or is aware of our experience. It's the neti approach. I'm not this, I'm not this. And so that's the it could be called the via negativa, the way of negation, the way of turning away from the content of experience. And then there's the tantric approach, which is rather the opposite. It involves a turning towards the content of experience, in this case, our painful emotions, but not just turning towards them, actively embracing them. First of all, turning towards them, welcoming them, loving them, what they call in the tantric tradition, devouring your emotions, bringing them so close that you turn them into yourself, so to speak. You awareness, you turn the emotion into yourself. You dissolve the emotion in yourself. It's the process that's beautifully illustrated in the grim fairy tale of Kiss the Toad. And if you remember in that story, the princess has a golden ball, which she loses in the royal pond. And she's very upset, distraught. She's lost her ball. She can't get it back. And a frog appears in the pond and says, I'll get I'll retrieve your ball for you, as long as you, on one condition. And that is that you take me back into the castle and embrace me. And the princess, without thinking, says, yes, of course, anything to get my ball back. So the frog retrieves the ball. Off the princess skips back into the castle without giving the frog another thought. And she's having dinner with her father, the king, that night, and there's a knock on the door. And the frog appears to remind the princess of her part of the deal, to embrace the frog. So rather embarrassed, she explains to her father, the king, and the frog comes to sit next to her at dinner. And the frog says that's fine. I'm paraphrasing, of course. That's fine, but it's not enough. You said that you would embrace me. So that night she takes the frog to bed and has the frog on her pillow with her. And then he reminds her that she agreed to embrace him. So she embraces the frog before she falls asleep, and of course wakes up in the morning to find the handsome prince asleep in bed next to her. So the obvious analogy in relation to painful emotions is that we turn towards and embrace that which is most distasteful to us. And in doing so, we find at the very heart of it the happiness we previously sought by trying to avoid it. So most of our painful emotions, they are unbearable, painful, unpleasant. We want to either suppress them so we don't fully feel them, or we want to distract ourselves from them with substances, activities, relationships, and so on. But the one thing we never do is turn toward, or the one thing we rarely do is turn towards them and first of all, turn towards them, then actively welcome them rather than push them away, and then really embrace them. Because we embrace anything, there can be no resistance in us to the person or the thing that we are embracing. And the one thing we have done all our lives is to resist painful emotions. In fact, it's not the emotion itself that is painful. It is our resistance to it that confers pain, unbearableness on the emotion. It's the resistance that is the problem, not the actual experience itself. So in this second approach that I sometimes refer to as the tantric approach, we bring the emotions so close that we can no longer even distinguish it from ourselves. So when we say, for instance, I am lonely, in this experience there is the feeling of loneliness, and there is the I that feels it. So the Vedantic approach, we turn our attention away from the loneliness and we explore the nature of the I, the one who feels it. But in this tantric approach, we collapse the distance. In the Vedantic approach, we increase the distance between ourself and the emotion. But in the tantric approach, we collapse the distance between ourself and the emotion until we can there's no longer any distance between ourself and the emotion. And when there's no longer any distance between ourself and anything, we can no longer name it. In just the same way that the eye can only see something that is at a distance from itself. So only in the same way, it's only possible to name something as an emotion, or indeed anything else, that we stand apart from and we observe it from a distance. If you bring the emotion so close that you can't stand apart from it, the emotion loses its name. We don't even know that it is loneliness or sorrow or depression. It is just raw, unnameable experience. And as such, it is neither pleasant nor unpleasant. In order to define something as pleasant or unpleasant, we have to separate ourselves from it, look at it from a distance. So that's in this tantric approach, we bring the emotion close, turn towards it, cease resisting it.
So let me go a little further based on what you said. You know, while you're speaking about the kiss the toad or embrace the toad, I also remember something from Rumi. He says the only way to go beyond the fire is through the fire.
Yes.
The way out of the fire is through the fire.
The way through the fire, yes. He's referring to the same experience, the same approach, yes.
Now, so second thing was when you become so intimate with it that you become one with it and you can't name it, I would say then that's transcendence. You have transcended whatever sensation you were interpreting as an emotion, because all this is a sensation, right?
Yes, you've transcended it, but not in the Vedantic sense, where you have distanced yourself from it, removed yourself from it, and recognized yourself as the presence of awareness to which the emotion appears. That's also a kind of transcendence. But this is, in this case, you're right. It is a transcendence, but you're transcending the emotion by going so far into the heart of it that you find at its very heart the happiness or the peace that you previously sought by trying to escape it. So yes, it is a kind of transcendence. You're transcending your resistance to it, and this embracing of the emotion transforms the emotion into happiness. It's the alchemical process of turning a base metal into gold.
So let me, again, going further into the same two ways that you mentioned, when one does inquiry on the nature of emotion, not just nature of who or what is having this experience,
yes,
but on the nature of emotion itself, when you do inquiry, at least when I've done that, I've realized that no emotion actually belongs to you unless you take ownership of it. And if you do, and you try to hold on to it, even that's impossible, because nothing ephemeral can be held on to anyway. But then I ask myself, is anger mine? Do I own anger? Do I own fear? Or is it universal and I'm forcing myself to own it?
yes.
I mean, that's a form of inquiry too, right?
That's very true. The separate, the I can only exist by separating itself from an experience. That's what the ego is, the separate I. So if we bring an emotion so close to us that we can no longer stand apart from it and name it sorrow or guilt or shame, let alone call it unpleasant, that if we take the emotion so deeply into ourselves that the separate I actually ceases, that there simply is no separate I present any longer, either to claim the emotion or not to claim the emotion. All that is present is just the raw energy of the experience. Now, it may be intense, but just because it's intense, it doesn't mean it's unpleasant. So there will just be the intensity of the experience, neither pleasant nor unpleasant, nor any separate self there to transcend the experience, to overcome the experience, to embrace the experience. There just simply isn't another entity present. There is just the raw experience itself, and there's nobody there to call it good or bad or right or wrong or pleasant or unpleasant. It's just what it is.
So Rupert, in the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, the most important sentence, which is the second sentence, first is now begins the teaching of yoga. And the second sentence is Yog Chit Vritti Nirodh. So vritti is the fluctuations of awareness that we experience as mind. Chit Vritti, Chit is the pure awareness from where these fluctuations are coming. And yoga is the settling down of these vrittis, which we call emotions, perceptions, sensations, images, thoughts, sense experiences. When they settle down, we go back to the source of all that is, and we call that presence. That's the entire teaching of yoga is in that one sentence. Yoga also means yuj, union with the source. When Jesus says, my yoke is easy, my burden is light, even though he's going to be crucified, well, he's found the source of all existence. which is beyond sadness and these fluctuations of the mind. So in many ways, the Vedantic tradition, the Tantric tradition, and yoga are actually pointing to going back to the source of all experience and knowing that when you are there, you're holy, you're whole, and you're healed. So I think what you're putting together is a modern version and a very practical lived-in experience of what yoga, tantra, and Vedanta are saying, and Kashmir Shaivism are saying
Yes.
in their own
Yes.
ways. Would you agree?
I would, Deepak. Yes, yes. If we were to break this down into the three steps you mentioned earlier, the first step we could say is for one who is completely lost in the content of their experience, the first step is, as you know, is to recognize oneself as the presence of the witnessing or the observing presence of awareness. I am the presence of awareness. The second step is then to realize that awareness is not just it's not like the sun that illuminates the earth from a distance. It's not like an aloof witness or observer that observes experience impartially from a distance. The relationship between awareness and experience is much closer. Awareness, we could, at this stage, in this second stage, we could liken to a space, not just to which experience appears, but within which experience appears. More like the sky of awareness in which the clouds of thoughts, feelings, sensations, and so on appear. But then this third step, and I think this is now what we're talking about, that the recognition that the content of experience, in this case, painful emotions, are not just known by awareness. They don't just appear in awareness, but they are made of awareness. Just like, so our emotions are not like fishes in the ocean. They're more like currents in the ocean, made of the very water itself. And so, once that's the process of what they say in the Kashmir tradition, they say devouring your emotions. What they mean is that awareness takes the emotion so deeply into itself. The emotion is merged in awareness so fully that it is recognized to be only the activity of this luminous, empty presence of awareness. And there's nothing, awareness cannot be harmed by its own activity. The ocean is never harmed by a current within it. So once the emotion has been totally welcomed, totally taken into oneself, there is no resistance left to it. And we cannot be harmed or hurt by it. The emotion loses its afflictive quality and it is realized as peace. That's the Ananda in the Vedantic tradition, that the joy that is the very substance even of painful emotions.
So Rupert, as you were speaking and you're giving that analogy of the fish and the current in the ocean, I had this thought, and let's see what you think of it. It's obvious that the current is a modified form of the ocean. The current is water, and so is the ocean, water. So it's, just a slightly modified form.
Yes.
But the fish too is a modified form of the ocean. The ocean is that fish. That fish now, but that's a grosser modified form of the ocean, because the fish is made out of the ocean. How
Yes.
could it not be?
Yes.
So you and I are made out of consciousness as what we call body and physical world, but we are made out of consciousness as mind and feelings and emotions. They're more like the currents. And the physical body and the physical appearance of the world are more like the fish, but they're all made out of chit or pure awareness. Is that a kind of a nice way to think about it? But the fish and the current, they're all ocean. That's the non-dual You know,
Yes.
when the fish recognizes I am ocean, just when you and I recognize I am pure awareness, the fish is liberated.
Yes.
If it was that way.
Yes. When I suggested that an emotion was more like a current in the ocean rather than a fish in the ocean, I was referring to some formulations of the non-dual understanding, which I know both you and I use, and which are perfectly legitimate. When we say, for instance, that the contents of experience, thoughts, feelings, and so on, are objects appearing in awareness. So at this stage, we're still making a distinction between the content of experience, thoughts and emotions and perceptions, and the space of awareness. So in that sense, the content of experience are like fishes in the ocean or birds in the sky, something separate from the sky. So what I was trying to point towards was the fact that our emotions are actually, the relationship between an emotion and awareness is closer than a fish in the water. It's more like a current. Well, of course, ultimately the fish is made out of the ocean, but in the way I was using it, I was using. So could we say, so moving on from that now, could we say that the fish is if our thoughts and feelings are like currents in the ocean, the body and the world are like fishes in the ocean?
It's what we call the physical body, the subtle body, and the cosmic.
Yes, you know, William Blake, one of the great tantric masters of the Western tradition, said this incredible thing. He said, the body is that portion of the soul. He called it the soul, but he means what we mean by mind. The body is that portion of the mind that is discerned by the five senses. That's an incredible insight. What he's saying is that what the body is really is mind. It's not made out of matter, it's made out of mind. But when perceived through the five senses, through our perceiving faculties, it appears as a body.
Which is the same thing as saying that the body is a species-specific perceptual activity, which in turn is a modified form of consciousness anyway. So, you know, perceptual activity is an activity. You know, the mind is not a noun, it's a verb, and the body is not a noun, it's a verb.
Yes.
One is a gross perceptual activity and the other is a subtle perceptual activity.
Yes. William Blake said another thing, which is very similar, a well-known phrase of his. He said, every bird that cuts the airy way is an immense world of delight enclosed by the five senses.
Wow.
Every bird that flies in the sky and by extension, every object in the world is an immense world of delight, ananda, immense world of delight enclosed by the five senses. So again, what he's saying, like he said about the body, what he's saying, what the bird really is not a physical object made out of dead inert stuff called matter. It's, in his words, an immense world of delight. He's referring to the Sanskrit word ananda, the being, consciousness and joy. So what he's saying is that what the bird really is this infinite, aware, joyful being enclosed by the five senses. So it looks like a bird when this bundle of joy made out of pure consciousness is perceived through our limited perceiving faculties. Then it appears to us as a bird, but it appears to be something finite, temporary, limited. But the thing in itself, the real, is not something finite, temporary, and limited. It is infinite consciousness. It's only our senses that make it appear to be something finite. And likewise, the body. The body is that portion of the mind that is, when it is perceived through the five senses. So this is...
Was it Blake who said we are led to believe a lie when we see with and not through the eye?
Exactly, yes.
Born in a night to perish in a night. While
yes, it's the same thing.
Of light.
Exactly, yes. Yes, exactly. When we think that we see with the eye, then we see a corresponding multiplicity and diversity of objects. But when we realize we see through our sense perceptions, and our sense perceptions confer their own limitations on reality, then we realize that what we're really looking at is just an appearance of the one infinite being. And again, from the same tradition, William Wordsworth said this. It's part of a marvelous poem he wrote. He said, "Therefore am I still a lover of the meadows and the woods and mountains, and of all that we perceive of this green earth, of all the mighty world of eye and ear, both what they half create and half perceive, well pleased to recognize in nature and the language of the sense, the anchor of my purest thoughts, the nurse, the guide, the guardian of my heart and soul of all my moral being." This beautiful phrase, both what they half create and half perceive. So what he's saying is that what we're looking at when we look at the world is reality, the one infinite reality. That's not created by our minds. That precedes our minds and is independent of our finite minds. So we perceive reality, but we create its appearance. Just like when you look at white snow through orange tinted glasses, it appears orange. Well, the snow precedes being perceived through the glasses, but it gets its orange color from the glasses. So we half perceive what's there, the white snow, we half create it, the orange color. So what Wordsworth is saying is that the world as we see it is half perceived, that is its reality, and it's half created. It owes its apparent limitations to our perceiving faculties.
I'm speaking with Rupert Spira, and we today were only focusing on one particular chapter in his book, which is on attending to painful emotions. But this book has a wealth of gems for you and for you to know yourself ultimately as the wholeness of existence. So I'll just read the headlines. Introduction, a silent prayer. Chapter 1, the search for happiness. Chapter 2, know thyself. Chapter 3, are you myself? Chapter 4, the art of self-inquiry. Chapter 5, the essence of meditation. Chapter 6, the ultimate prayer. Chapter 7, the silent presence of awareness. 8, the open, empty, aware space. 9, peace and happiness is our nature. 10, a belief in separation. 11, there is only one self. 12, who is it that suffers? 13, our innate happiness. 14, suffering is our own activity. 15, the way of surrender. 16, take refuge in the now. 17, attending to painful emotions. 18, the unity of being. 19, the all-pervasive spirit, and then an invitation. So as I'm reading these chapters, I was thinking, even as I was reading this could be a series of conversations on this book, but also, Rupert, at some point, I'm going to start some master classes on these subjects. Maybe, we can do something together on these master classes too.
Of course, I would love to, Deepak. Be very happy to.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, comment, and share. You can also visit deepakchopra.com for upcoming events, news, and books.